Albert Einstein once wrote, "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." We can see this significance throughout society. Moreover, this quote defines the movement towards education reform and how blinded we are by traditional values. As a result of our ineffective attempts to better our education system, the United States is beginning to lose in a world race as an economic power. Subsequently, we must step back and evaluate the effectiveness of standardized testing, and finally appraise our government's vain efforts to establish a successful and contentious education system. Taken as a whole, America's potential is far greater than what we've been operating with. And with incessant shortcomings on behalf of our government, an abolition of our current system, and the proposition of a novel education system based on those of other successful countries would be fit. In the ever-changing world economy, countries have gone to great lengths to reform their social infrastructures in the attempt to maintain a high stature as well as competitive advantage. The problem with America is, although most government officials agree that the education system needs restoration, no upstanding action has been taken. From this, with international tests showing that the United States no longer leads in kindergarten to 12th grade learning, an emerging coalition of reformers is aiming to use market-based ideas to improve the nation's 99,000 public schools. A vital asset of the education system is pre-secondary schooling, in which the nation is continually falling short in. Therefore, lower success before college would evidently produce lower success of the American public once they got to secondary schooling. In due course, these statistics actually contribute to the shortcomings of graduates. Unfortunately, according to the Heritage Foundation, millions of children pass through American schools without receiving a quality education that prepares them to compete in the increasingly competitive global economy. Subsequently, because of the lack of preparation, long-term side effects include, but are not limited to, unemployment, outsourcing, and perhaps recessions. Before any large-scale modifications are made, parents must evaluate what are the goals for our children. Additionally, while many people want to be reassured that things are going to be just fine, ignoring the real message actually impairs our economic future. When all is said and done, the people responsible for this crisis are said to be the teachers. These are the scapegoats held accountable in society's view for the failed actions of our government. Instead of pointing the finger of blame on only the academic enthusiasts, implications must be made that would incorporate the teachers in the decision process. Finland, for instance, takes a much different and more logical approach to testing students. The public school systems there are trained to assess the children in classrooms using independent tests that the teachers create themselves. From this, instead of simply blaming the teachers, Finland gave them the necessary tools to the first source. The government did not unknowingly make second-hand actions without knowing firsthand what to do. Stepping back, given the nation's current position in the education sphere, every action our government has taken in the past decade has been a step backward, resulting in controversies and an underlying unsolved crisis that bears the question: what to do with the education system? Digging deeper into the education calamity, many say a useless aspect of our education system is standardized testing. For starters, Finland has no standardized tests. From the inception of the standardized test, its goal was to measure students' achievement. And with former President George Bush's No Child Left Behind policy, the use of standardized testing has only increased. Of course, if one were to increase the frequency of a standardized test, then there would be obviously positive outcomes, right? In any case, standardized testing has not improved student achievement. After the No Child Left Behind policy was passed in 2002, the U.S. slipped from 18th in the world in math to 31st place in 2009, with a similar drop in science and no change in reading. On May 26, 2011, the National Research Council report found no evidence that test-based incentive programs are working. And in their conclusion letter, they wrote, "Despite using them for several decades, policymakers and educators do not know how to use test-based incentives to consistently generate positive effects on achievement and to improve education." After years of standardized testing and countless research, the National Research Council came to the conclusion of, "We're just not sure yet." Now, what does this mean? If the top researchers in the world can't come to a definitive conclusion of the effectiveness of a specific act that has been around for over 100 years now, then one might assume that it is not effective at all. Aside from the fact that they do not improve achievement, they don't even provide an accurate measurement of a student performance. A 2001 study published by the Brookings Institution found that 50 to 80% of year-over-year test score improvements were temporary and inconsistent. They also measure only a small portion of what makes education meaningful. Given these uncorrelated results, a notable conclusion is made. We use a single standardized test that doesn't even measure the full capacity of knowledge of a scholar to determine their future. Perhaps this is a contributory effect to why America continues to fall behind world education standards. Furthermore, by essentially prostituting information that would be seemingly useless when being compared to standardized testing, we inevitably damage the productivity of students. In order for one to fully comprehend the full complexity of standardized tests, one must break it apart into three pieces: the preparation, the test itself, and the aftermath. To begin with the preparation, students in school from kindergarten to 12th grade usually do not begin preparations for standardized testing like the ACT or SAT until late into the 10th grade. Everything before that would be considered unnecessary, since you rarely need to know the chemical makeup of glucose or where the author who wrote the book The Great Gatsby was born. In essence, everything learned previously that is supposed to prepare students for college is deemed useless, simply because these tests do not require this previous knowledge. To continue to the test itself, the ACT-SAT is a strategically planned attack that uses elaborate trick questions and requires strong attention to detail, including reasoning and problem solving. For instance, it is essential for a student to know whether or not it would be okay for the author to add the following phrase after the third sentence in body paragraph 2. It is questions like this that define the issue with standardized tests. To put it simply, why does somebody have to know this to get into a good college? And that's a very good, yet unanswered, rhetorical question that transitions perfectly into the third part of the standardized test, the aftermath. Now I'd like you to picture this. Someone gets their ACT results back, and they receive an overall of 36. And that's pretty good. It's the best grade you could get. They are therefore accepted into Harvard. But think about how much smarter that person must be, since they know whether or not it's okay for the author to add the following sentence there. Think about how often this person will use such vital information. To be concise, the standardized test, as they are known today, is an unfortunate, irrevocable nuisance that has overstayed its welcome, and we are to blame for this exhausted system to determine the future of our society. To put it simply, our government has failed, catastrophically. It continues to provide a redundant, lack of innovation instead of abolishing and restructuring. Many say this education downturn is only a phase. But it is this type of mentality that continues to forlorn this nation's students. A clear recent example of our government falling short is George Bush's infamous No Child Left Behind policy. This law was passed by Bush as a short-term band-aid for the education system, which is consisted of no Neosporin to prevent long-term infection. In addition, any improvement from this act is minimal at best. Although it is great to see our government doing more for our education system, they are more or less beating a dead horse. And they must start building from the ground up and working on something with guaranteed results instead of something that is more potential. By ostracizing the underperforming schools, which the No Child Left Behind policy did, we are only increasing the outliers and worsening our statistics. Even non-reformers like Kevin Huffman of the Washington Post agree that the No Child Left Behind policy catalyzed the case of American children falling by international standards. This colossal failure brought to us by George Bush was detrimental and set us back as a country many years. Our government's failures are not limited to the No Child Left Behind policy, and there are plenty more that contribute to these negative side effects. But taken as a whole, America possesses a potential far greater than anyone's belief. And with the incessant shortcomings on behalf of our government, they must abolish this current and outdated education system and collaborate to develop a concise and cohesive system that fits our current state and political climate. The nation must begin by assessing ourselves in the rankings of the world, and then evaluate the effectiveness of these standardized tests that we hold ourselves to, and finally learn from our mistakes. America mustn't continue hoping that something is going to get better, because if this continues, it only gets worse from here. Quoting back to Einstein, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This is insanity.